Good morning. It is very ironic that our computer went out today. And you'll see why based on the message, but I think what's happening is it's running updates and it was like blinking and flashing and doing all kinds of weird stuff. And when Windows runs these dumb updates, it like completely crashes these computers. So anyway, I think that's what's going on, but it's nice that we were able to go old school. We went back to songbooks, pre-COVID era, and you guys did quite well. So just kind of moving on the fly. I did have up on the screen, which is not up on the screen now, I had a picture of a waiting room. And I don't know how many of you like sitting in waiting rooms, and I'm talking about at doctor's offices or hospitals. How many of you just love that feeling of going into a waiting room and sitting and waiting? Not a single hand has gone up. And when I saw this picture and put the picture up, I could actually smell the smells of the waiting room, right? They all have this distinctive smell. There's a feeling that when you walk into a waiting room, you can't really put into words, but you all know what I'm talking about, right? You walk into a waiting room and it's that gut-wrenching feeling of all the unknowns. Even for exciting things like births and things that we get really excited about, there's something about waiting rooms that doesn't sit right with us. And I really think it's about this build-up to all the unknowns that we're expecting the next shoe to drop, or we're expecting bad news, or something like that. I want to say the past 2 weeks, for some reason, kind of out of nowhere, I have really been struggling and fighting off this depression that I was like, where in the world is this coming from? And so I just was doing a lot of reflecting, and it's just like not wanting to wake up and not wanting to get out of bed. And most of us have been there at different times in our lives, and sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. But I started thinking about all the things, and I kind of mention this sometimes, but all the things this congregation has been through. And then on top of that, I started thinking about all the things that our family has been through in addition to that. And I know all of us have our own stuff that we're going through. And so I started putting down a timeline starting in the wretched year of 2020, the year of COVID, when everybody's world seems to really have changed pretty dramatically. Coming into 2020, I was going to kind of walk through this timeline and talk through this a little bit. Coming into 2020, I was under some unimaginable stress with, I hate to be cryptic, but something publicly I can't really talk about, but it was kind of this anticipation and waiting for news and just kind of sitting around and waiting. And so February of 2020, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I received a message that I was waiting for. It was a text, and it was like this big, huge sigh of relief. It was good news. The next month, March 13 of 2020, Natalie knows this date well. Natalie and Eden, what do you guys mark this date as? Friday the 13th, 2020. It was the year the world shut down. They joked about it. It was full moon, if I remember right. Full moon. It was a Friday, and it was the 13th. And that was when all the schools closed, all the businesses closed. There was this national announcement that the world is shutting down. So full moon, Friday the 13th, March 13th, and literally overnight, we became homeschoolers. All of you parents who have kids in school, for the next almost the school year, we were working from home the best we could. Our kids were on their iPads trying to figure it out. Actually, the first few months, they were given packets, and they didn't even have their iPads. And so our kids were working through these big, thick packets. Instantly we became homeschoolers. Places of work shut down. Many of them have not reopened. They went out of business. The economy came to a grinding halt. And in 2020, we had an unprecedented presidential election year. Most of those were done by absentee ballots because the world was shut down. August 2nd of 2020, I got a kind of a strange phone call from U.S. Marshals, and they said, there's a missing woman, and we think you might be able to help us find her. Her name is Mary Lane Carter. Some of you may recognize the story, but she was a minister's wife from Kansas who just got in her car and kind of drove off and never said anything. She just started driving, and she went missing. And so, strangely, I had some bizarre links and was able to give a little bit of information. But on August 18th, one day before my birthday, I got a call from the Marshals that said, we found Mary Lane Carter, she's dead. Nancy Grace actually did an episode on Crime Stories about this story, that just a lot of really bizarre details behind this mysterious death. November 17th of 2020, I got a phone call that one of my very best friends, Mark Friedline, was right across the street in the hospital with COVID. That was on a Tuesday. On Thursday, I got a phone call on the 19th that he passed. He didn't make it. I preached his funeral. 8 days after his death, on November 27th, I got a frantic phone call from Mike Riggs, the day after Thanksgiving. And he told me that Bill was on his way to the hospital and that he wasn't expected to make it. Going into 2021, February 16th, what was supposed to be, I think, an exciting day, it was when my book released. I had written a book in the middle of COVID, in the middle of all this stuff going on, kind of homeschooling the kids. Church, as we know, completely changed. I had a picture up there of our worship service. We had 9 people for 8 weeks. Remember, the government said you're only allowed 10 people maximum in person. And so for 8 weeks, we had 9 people. I have a picture of DP and Dave back there. DP is giving the thumbs up. There was no booth at the time. They were just kind of huddled around with a laptop, and we were live streaming our service, trying to figure this whole thing out. Shortly after my book release in 2021, on March 3rd, our dear sister Nimioler died. I preached her funeral. That was the 3rd funeral that I'd preached successively. May 9th, 2021 was a Sunday. That was the Martins' last Sunday. And effectively, the day that our eldership and deacons kind of dissipated and we were left with no real leadership structure anymore. 2 days later, I received a phone call from Lisa Leck saying she was sobbing kind of uncontrollably, and she said, Mike made the decision to stop all dialysis. He'll be gone within 2 weeks. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, Dave and I went up almost daily and visited with Mike and with Lisa and the kids, and we kind of hung out with him and stayed with him until he died on May 31st, on Memorial Day of 2021. Now the 4th friend. During that summer, I was making visits over just a few blocks down to a good friend of mine, Kimberly Onder, who had stage 4 cancer and was really struggling with knowing that she was going to die, and talking about that and saying, this is a bizarre thing to know that your end is coming. On October 21st, I received a phone call from her husband, Jim, that Kim had passed. Now the 5th funeral that I've done in less than a year. And then coming into 2022, this year, in February, the very beginning of this year, I received a phone call that my sister Michelle had gone into the hospital. She was up at Conemaugh, and she was on life support. That it was very serious. She was on life support. Throughout that process, just this year, making tons of visits, going up to visit her in the hospital, phone calls with family members, daily text messages that we still get on updates on her health condition. We were just kind of trying to figure this out. Like, is she going to make it? Is she not going to make it? The prognosis was not good at all. And then this summer, I think it was in June, this summer, I got a phone call saying that Michelle's not going to make it. Within the next 48 hours, she'll be gone. And so I began the process of making phone calls to family members who are out of state to tell them, our sister's not going to make it. You guys need to come up, which we did. We came up. People were saying their goodbyes, and God provided a miracle, and Michelle, I'm happy to say, is still with us. She's actually at home. She's with her family, and not saying she's doing great, but she is a walking miracle. Friday, just this past Friday, a couple days ago, if any of you watch the economy and kind of what's going on with that, the stock market nosedived. For the first time, officially, it entered into bear market territory, signaling a recession is here. I mark this year, 2022, is us sitting in the waiting room. And I was kind of thinking about this, and I was like, all right, going back through and looking at this timeline, a lot has happened in less than 2 years' time. And so we're sitting in this waiting room with all of these unexpected things just waiting for something to happen. And we don't know, good or bad. We don't know. We can't predict the future. I don't claim to be a prophet. I don't want to be a prophet. We don't know what the future holds. And so as I was going back and trying to really pinpoint and figure out what the source of this sadness and depression is coming from, I was like, we have been through a lot. We've been through a lot. And so many unknowns and so many dramatic changes, and it's no wonder. And so I say, as a congregation, my message of hope, this is not a depressing message, my message of hope is that if you look around and you see people here, we made it. We're here. We're in person. People's attitudes are incredibly positive. People are kind, compassionate towards each other. And I'm super encouraged by that. Our scripture comes out of Isaiah. And Isaiah was in the waiting room. We're up there again. Okay, good. Isaiah was in the waiting room. Isaiah preached during a really difficult time in Israel's history. You want to bring it to me? DP was hesitant, but I gave the green light. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, DP. Now you get to see the pictures I was talking about. All right, there's the waiting room. Can you guys picture this scene? We've all kind of been there. You know what I mean? You can smell the smell of that, whatever that fabric is that they use in those chairs. I think that's what that smell is. Every waiting room has the same smell. They're kind of decorated. The decor is from the 1970s. You walk in and you're like, holy, 1975, here we are. Every waiting room is like this. I've not experienced a waiting room that's been any different than this. Here was that picture I was talking about. Here's right after COVID hit. Here's our booming worship service with all 9 of us who are here, while our families were at home watching online. And then back to the waiting room. I feel like this is where we are right now. We're kind of in this waiting room with all of these unknowns. And we don't really know what's going to happen next. And this is where Isaiah preached from. Isaiah was preaching during the 8th century. And so Isaiah witnessed the fall of the north. When Assyria came in 722 BC and absolutely annihilated people in the northern tribes, Isaiah witnessed it. He was there. He was present. He knew the heartache. He knew trouble and disaster and problems and death and all these unknowns that come with it. What is God doing with our nation? What is happening right now? There's so much going on in the lives of people. And how do I preach in that context? That's where Isaiah was. And in chapter 40, I absolutely love it because he's talking about the comfort for God's people. I'm just going to read verses 1 through 5, and then we're going to skip to the end of the chapter where Jacob read for us. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. And we, of course, we know that passage is prophesying about John the Baptist. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. This is a message in the middle of all this turmoil. Speak to Jerusalem. Speak tenderly to her. Let her know that God is on her side. And then the last part of the chapter, starting in verse 28. And a lot of us know this really well. Some of you probably have this hanging up in your house somewhere. Isaiah says, have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary. I think this is one of those things. We think that as young people, we have all this energy and we have all this insight, and we kind of are planning our futures, and we know what's ahead of us, and we're all excited. And God's saying even youths will faint and grow weary. When life is tough, no amount of energy aside from God is going to carry you through it. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. As I read this, my hope was renewed. We've been talking about prayer. We've been talking about things that we can do as a congregation to reach into the community and to get into the lives of each other. And I thought about this, and I thought the waiting room that we associate with all this anxiety and all these unknowns is actually the place where God meets us. And he says, the people who wait for the Lord, the people who are in this waiting room, shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. I think it's one of the most powerful messages in the world, especially right now in 2022, as the world is just, guys, look around. The world is tired. The world is tired. But the people who wait for the Lord, they're the ones who will have renewed strength. They'll mount up with wings like eagles. In other words, you'll soar. God will bring people out of troubled times, and he'll give you renewed strength. He'll give you renewed vision. I think there are big things in store for God's church. I really, honestly, truthfully, with all of my heart, believe it. Honest to God, I believe it. And so what do we do? While we have plans, and that's our theme for this year, to have plans and to set goals and to do those things, yet it's God who establishes our steps. The other thing that we should do is be okay with waiting. If we kind of go back and we're like, man, it seems like we didn't make a lot of progress this year as a church. You don't say, right? When you're in that moment of all of this hard stuff that's going on in life, of course you're not making a lot of progress. You're just trying to survive. That's what Brent's message is about in Job. Job was just trying to survive. But look at the end of Job's life, right? Job was in the waiting room. He was waiting for the Lord. And God renewed his strength. Job mounted up with wings like eagles. He ran and wasn't weary. He walked, he didn't faint. Job came out refined. And I have no doubt that we'll do the same. I think we're extremely resilient. as a church, as a people, as a family, as a nation, I think we're incredibly resilient. Steph and Ronnie were talking about that in Haiti. Haiti right now is experiencing a lot of problems. Starvation just like crazy right now. And Ronnie said on Wednesday, but the Haitian people are resilient. They'll find a way to get food. They'll find a way to take care of each other. They'll find a way to make it out on the other side of this. And if we wait for the Lord, God's going to do indescribable things in our lives. We're promised that. So I just ask that you wait with me and have patience and know that God is working in all of our lives. God is doing great things. Sometimes it's hard to see that in the middle of all the stuff that's going on, but God is doing great things. If there's anybody this morning who has not yet taken that step to put Christ on a baptism, or if you have any prayer needs, we'd invite you to come up. We're all going to stand. DP is going to lead us in this song together.